Welcome to Contemporary First Nation Voices. This is NBE 3C, grade 11 English, college level, and this is Jillian Percy. Today is class 28, and we are working on question 42. Here are all the ways to contact us. The studio, 1-800-465-7144. And that only works while I'm on air. The office number, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. Remember that the main office closes at 4:30, but you can still reach me by email for a little while after that. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. And then my Facebook is capital G, capital P, ERCY space, capital WAHSA. If you send me a Facebook request, like a friend request, please also send me a little message saying your proper, like your legal name and which course you're currently taking, because I've got about 4 different courses, so I need to kind of know which one you're in. And if you're wanting help with a specific assignment, list what number that assignment is too, so I can kind of give it a quick glance over before I check in with you. If you want to see previously recorded classes, they are on YouTube. I have a teacher channel, which also is called G Percy WASA, and there is a school channel called WASA Distance Education YouTube channel, and that has all the different teachers classes on from this year. Okay, how to hand in work. This is probably my most asked question. There are lots of different ways you can hand in assignments. If you are at a community that has a learning center, the easiest way is ask the DEC to scan it in for you and then email it along to me, and you hang on to the originals. You can also fax it at 1-800-463-7852, 1-877-990-2023 for the national. If you are faxing, make sure the print is nice and dark. You can scan it using a scanner app on your phone and then send it to me. That is one of the best ways to do it if you are able to do that. And I'll talk to you about how precisely to do that in a minute. You can mail it, but that is not my first suggestion. It will take a while and things do sometimes get lost. You will want to hang on to the originals. If you use Google Docs, you can share it with me. Make sure to include me as somebody who can view it or edit it. You can also take a photograph of it. Now, the photographs aren't as clear as when you use the scanner app on your phone. The scanner app is designed to read documents and tiny little lines like we have on your assignments, whereas photographs are really meant for larger objects. They just don't work quite as well. But if you do take a photograph, make sure it's clear and not blurry, preferably written in pen so it's dark enough for me to read. For some reason, pencil doesn't show up very well on photographs, I find. The photo should be taken with the phone parallel to the assignment so the writing doesn't get distorted. And once you've got all that, don't just click the share button because it comes up at a very odd size. Don't cut and paste it into an email. Instead, save it as a file and then write me an email and attach it. That is the easiest way for it to work. Some people will also put the photograph on like a Word document. If so, make sure you put 1 photograph per Word document. Don't try and stick 4 or 5 on, because what happens is by the time it gets to me, if I try and expand it to look at it, it gets all pixelated. I can't read it at all, okay? Whenever you hand in work, send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. You can include me in the email if you want to. The reason it goes to student work is that way the secretary can log that you submitted the work. It gets printed off. It also gets recorded in our database that you sent it in. So if something happened to me and a new teacher came along, they would know how to find it, okay? On the physical assignment itself, not just the email, make sure your full name, first and last, is on there, the course name, and the assignment number and name. Sometimes we have students that have very similar names, like Rachel and Rochelle, and they may have the exact same last name. So if things like that happen, it's really important that we know for sure who you are when I'm giving marks, okay? If an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which one is which and include them both in the same email. So if you want to do the scanner app, this is a nice way to do it is I use Adobe Scan myself for like tax forms and medical forms and things like that. Install it and then open it up. And you would just use it almost like you're taking a photograph. It just gives a much crisper, more detailed picture. You can play around with the borders a little bit. It'll flatten it out. If you have more than one page, just keep on repeating steps 2 and 3. When you're happy and you've got everything scanned, tap continue. It'll let you review it then. And so if one of the pages came up kind of wonky or like blurry, then retake that shot. You can also reorder it, then hit save PDF, give it a name, obviously like whatever course it is, and then the assignment number, and then you need to save it. You can save it to Google Drive, you can save it to Dropbox, your phone's drive, whatever you want to do. Then again, write me an email and send it along. That's kind of the easiest way. Okay, so we are in week 9. This is the last week for live classes. However, if you're taking the course, we still are accepting assignments until around, I don't think we've settled the exact day, but it'll be around June 12th or so. If you are one of our potential grads, though, I strongly recommend handing it in by the end of May so that we have a chance to kind of mark things, okay? As I've mentioned, the teacher has changed from the beginning of the year, so I have changed some assignments or eliminated some. So the numbers I'm showing may not match the originals. You're welcome to hand in the original or the revised version until the end of the school year. I suggest getting the revised version as soon as possible. If it is past September 2025, because these videos stay up for a while, and you're listening to this, once September rolls around after the summertime, the original will no longer be acceptable. One of the reasons I've had to change the original so much this year is because a lot of the web links to different assignments or to like movies and things like that, they aren't working anymore. So there's no way to do some of the assignments without me changing them. So I had to kind of do a bunch of changes. So my apologies, because normally we try to get that done earlier in the year. So this unit we're calling Reading, Research, and Reflection, okay? Lesson 16. Okay, so we started talking about the novel study, and we're going to kind of continue on there today. So, rising action. The majority of the action in a novel is going to be the rising action. It's the biggest part of the book, generally. This is where the main character is trying to reach a goal or solve a problem, and generally, various obstacles get in the way, and the main character and sometimes other characters try to solve them in different ways. The rising action will end with a climax, which should be the most exciting section of the book. This might be where the hero and villain have their big showdown, or the hero overcomes some major temptation that has always beaten them before. The rising action may run for at least 75 to 85% of the novel. Not all chapters in a book will be of equal importance. Some might be dealing with minor subplots or maybe breaking a major event down into smaller sections. So, key question number 42 is all about the rising action. Now, because you have the choice of choosing your own book, I don't know how long your book is or how the author has plotted it, so there's no way for me to tell exactly how long the rising action will take in your book. You are going to have to make your best judgment about that. Essentially, the rising action has ended when the climax or the most exciting point of the story has happened. That's usually near the end of the book. Look at the questions below. Some of the work from questions 2 and 3 can be done kind of as you're working your way through the book. So number 1, we've looked at different types of conflict. We talked about that yesterday. When we look over the rising action, what is the major type of conflict in the book? Give at least 3 to 5 examples from the novel that help prove your opinion on what type of conflict is occurring. So I started using The Hunger Games yesterday just because I figured it's a book that a lot of people have read, or they maybe have seen the movie if they haven't read the book, so at least you kind of know what we're talking about. So I believe that there are 2 types of conflict in the book, The Hunger Games. One type is person versus society. For one thing, we see an example of Katniss breaking the rules of society in order to survive, for example, by hunting to get more food, which is technically illegal. Another reason I believe this is a main conflict is because the society seems actively designed to hurt the people in it, including the event of the Hunger Games, which is designed to remind the districts of the price of rebelling against the government. There is also a conflict of person versus person once Katniss is actually inside the Hunger Game event, because there can only be one winner. At times, she is able to simply hide from the other competitors, but other times she has to set traps to hurt or even kill them. She has to constantly evaluate the other people and find ways to outthink them so she can survive the games. Even when she teams up with some people, she does this knowing that they may later turn on her. So, just kind of quickly saying, I felt like this was fairly specific, although it could have used more details. So, I'm going to write that part. Okay, could use more. This one I thought was a little bit vague. I felt like I should name the times when she was hiding from people, or naming who she had to kill. So I felt like that was a bit vague. So I'm giving you kind of this example so you sort of know what I'm looking for. Altogether, this is 3 to 5, but it wouldn't have been 3 to 5 if I just included one part of it. Okay. Number 2. One strategy that students sometimes use to understand what they are reading is to make notes as they go along. So for this question, I want you to choose at least 10 chapters from the rising action section of your book, list the name and the number of the chapter, and then summarize the major events in the chapter. If your chapters are really short, this may only take a few sentences, but if your chapters are long, this may take more description. It just kind of depends on what you've got there. I deliberately did this for only 10 chapters, not for every chapter, because some books might have quite a few chapters. Also, I'm going to suggest there's very little point in doing chapter 1 because a lot of the material in there is already going to be answered by earlier questions. So I'm going to give an example from chapter 3 of The Hunger Games. Chapter 3. In this chapter, Katniss is allowed an hour to say goodbye to her loved ones before she is taken away to the Hunger Game event. She gives her mom and her sister Prim instructions on how to survive. Peeta's dad visits her and brings cookies and promises to look out for her sister. Her friend Madge gives her a gold pin of a mockingjay bird and makes her promise to wear it. They get on the train to the capital and are fed a lot of rich food and watch the rest of the districts choose their tributes. Question number 3. Some of the other strategies that students use to help themselves understand what they read is to make connections to their own lives, other books, or the world. Readers may also make inferences about characters' feelings or motivations if they aren't explicitly spelled out. Some students may ask questions about what is going on and monitor their comprehension to be sure they understand what is going on. Students may reflect on the plot or the theme, or express an opinion about the choices that characters are making. Students might also analyze or critique some of the choices that the writer has made. So as you are reading, choose at least 3 chapters to respond to the novel using some of these reading strategies. Note if all of your chapters are extremely short, like only a page or 2, you may want to comment on more like 5 or 6 of them in order to give yourself enough information to respond to. These should be chapters that have important events and choices in them. For this section, respond to the chapter with your opinion on the events and the actions of the characters in that chapter. Can you make connections or inferences about what is going on? Do you have any questions about the events? Have you been monitoring your comprehension to see if you're confused about anything? What is your opinion of the plot or the theme or the characters? Do you have any criticisms about the way the author is writing this book? For each chapter that you respond to, you should be writing a paragraph of at least 6 sentences. That's why I'm saying you may need to use 2 chapters to do that with, okay? Now, I'm probably not going to choose chapter 3 to respond to because I feel like it's not really the most exciting chapter. There's not really enough happening for me to say a lot. So I'm going to pick something, what did I, oh, sorry, I should have written it down here. My apologies. I think that I picked chapter 5. I'm sorry, I forgot. I don't know why I forgot to write that down. But anyways, This is a hard chapter to make connections to my own life because I've never faced anything as horrible as the Hunger Games. However, the horror of forcing children to fight to the death reminds me of some of the horrors of the concentration camps during World War II, where the guards would force the prisoners to do unspeakable things to see who would survive because it was all a source of amusement for them. The fact that there's somewhere there are people in the Capitol watching children kill each other for fun is horrifying, especially the fact that they even bet on which ones will survive. It is also grim that they broadcast the faces of which tributes died, which I think is a way to try to demoralize these young people further. I admire Katniss's ability to walk so far without food and water, as well as her cleverness in tying herself into the tree so she could sleep safely. I do feel like I understand how she is feeling when she has to listen to the gang kill the other girl who was hiding nearby. I've never seen anybody killed, but I have stood by helplessly while others were being bullied, and it is a terrifying thing to endure. I do wonder, why would PETA team up with the career tributes? Is he not really as good a person as Katniss originally thought? So you can see here that although I am talking about the events, my focus isn't on trying to provide a summary. My focus is more on my response, what I think, what I feel, what I wonder, what I judge about all the events that are occurring. However, I do make sure to link all those ideas and opinions into specific details of events that are going on in the chapter. I don't want to be so vague or general that it could be applied to any chapter. So doing that question should really take you all the way through the main part of the book. If you want to, you can read all the way to the end and then circle back to these questions. Or if you are kind of good at picking up when the climax is happening, you can stop there and do the questions. For section 2, you just keep on summarizing important chapters until you've got at least 10 chapters summarized. You wouldn't choose the end chapters, obviously, because those will be in the upcoming question. After you've gotten through most of the book, you can go back and pick 3 chapters to give your opinion on for section 3. So, and then we move on to lesson 17. So here we're still working on the novel study. Our goal is to finish reading the novel and to identify and reflect on the story elements, the use of reading strategies, other communication skills, and technology involved in promoting this book or the author. Writers promoting their own work. With all the different types of social media available on the internet, many writers may have multiple ways of promoting their own work. Promoting is kind of like a fancy way of just saying selling. Besides writing books, many writers may do presentations on their writing at bookstores, schools, or other venues. Some writers may also teach classes on writing or run writers' retreats as ways of making extra money. Writing books does not necessarily make a lot of money unless you're extremely successful. So many writers use different media platforms to help create multiple streams of income from their writing career. Because these platforms can be free or at least low cost, they offer an accessible way to promote your work for all sorts of writers, including Indigenous writers. Okay, so we're going to kind of go over some of the possible platforms that authors may use to try and promote their work. First of all, websites. Some authors will have websites where they write blog posts, sell their books, or include free writing such as poetry or short stories. They may include links on how to book them for a presentation or how to sign up for a writer's retreat. They might include a special magazine article or links to podcasts that they did when they were like a guest speaker. The website can become a central resource that the writer uses to tie in all their different sources of income. So below, I took a sample of Suzanne Collins' website. She's the lady that wrote The Hunger Games. See if I can make it a little bit bigger just so it's a little bit easier to read. Now, interestingly, she's kind of an exception for the rule. I don't know if you can see it. At the top, she's written, "This is the only official website for the author Suzanne Collins. I am not on any social media platforms. So any accounts that you may find in my name are not authorized by me." But you can see here, she'd have a little section about her. She's got a spot for books and interviews. She's got a spot for audiobooks. illustrations, and educational resources. And if you go through, you'd be able to just basically get other information from her. So she's pretty bare bones. I'm not sure why particularly. Not everybody makes huge uses of social media. She's pretty popular. Maybe she just doesn't kind of feel like she needs to. I don't know. Um, Hang on. There we go. Facebook. Not all writers use Facebook, but many do as a way of having conversations with their readers in a limited format or to post day-to-day news on events they may be attending or promoting. Below is a snapshot of Margaret Atwood's Facebook. She's a very famous Canadian writer where she is promoting published books, providing updates on books she's currently working on, and including some pictures of her travels or herself at different events. All these little details are appreciated by some fans as it makes them feel like they get to know the writer on a more personal level. Twitter, or what's now currently called X, this particular site has very strict word limits, which used to be only 140 characters, which is really not many words, but it's now expanded to 280 characters. That still isn't a whole lot, but a lot of people like being able to make just a short, quick comment on the events of the day and not really feeling like they have to write a whole lot. Lots of people use it to post links to news or motivational quotes or memes or polls or links to stories or to ask questions of their customers. This is a quick sample of Stephen King's X feed, which you can see there's not a whole lot on here. Give me a heart if you miss Barack Obama in the White House. Then he's got a little picture that looks a little bit like his story from It. And then he talks about his anniversary. There's another site called Blue Sky that's kind of arisen lately as sort of an alternative to X. So some authors might be on there instead of on Twitter. Twitter or /X has kind of gotten a little bit of a reputation for being a little more hateful these days because it's no longer being regulated so much. And then you've got TikTok. TikTok is a video sharing site that is hugely popular. It lends itself to short, quick videos on a variety of topics. Writers can post videos of short interviews, interesting questions or ideas, footage from current events, or other types of footage that fans might enjoy seeing. I'm not sharing examples because we have all those copyright issues on YouTube these days. YouTube itself is another video sharing site that lends itself to longer videos that may have a lot more editing done to them and may have a lot more of a polished look. Authors could live stream events, post interviews or podcasts, share life on the road, create writing how-to videos, or a wide variety of different videos that may help them get their work recognized. This is a clip from Brandon Sanderson, who I believe is a fantasy world writer. This is not by any means everything he's got, but these are some of the things that he has that people could check out. Instagram. This is another social media site that some writers may use, others may not use as much. It kind of depends a little bit what type of writer they are. The focus is more on pictures, so it's not always useful to certain types of writers, depending on their lifestyle and their willingness to post pictures of themselves. Some writers do a lot of photography, in which case that works really well for them. Snapchat is another site that focuses on photographs while also having private conversations with people. It's more likely to be used by the younger crowd, and it kind of encourages playing around with filters and visual effects. Not all writers are really going to use that because it's kind of more focused on having personal conversations, but there may be some writers out there that are using that, especially, younger ones. Okay, so we're moving on to a new question here. We've already talked about the beginning, and then we talked about the rising action. Now we're kind of talking about the last three parts because they all sort of work together: the climax, the resolution or the falling action, and the ending. If you haven't finished your book, you would want to finish it now before you answer the rest of these questions, okay? Question number one, depending on the writer, the climax of the story might be contained in one chapter, or it might be spread across several shorter chapters. In a detailed paragraph, describe the major climax of the book. Be sure to explain character actions, choices, and feelings. Discuss whether they have won or lost their major conflict, and this part should be at least 1/2 page long. So if I was looking at the movie The Hunger Games and trying to think where the climax is, I would say it's the part where only Peeta and Katniss are left in the games, and they had been told that maybe they would be allowed to both win. And at the last moment, the announcement was made that that was no longer possible. They were going to have to fight to the death, and they basically started to have an argument about who should die. And each one didn't want to be responsible for killing the other person. And then Katniss gets the idea that they should try to um, unalive themselves. The reason being that she thinks they'll stop them, that there has to be a winner, right? And so she takes these berries that she knows are poisonous, and she acts like her and Peeta are about to eat them. And sure enough, the government intervenes and stops them from unaliving themselves. And that's kind of the major point. Other things happen after that, but that's the most exciting part where the tension is so high because you don't know who is going to live or who is going to pass away, or are they both going to, or just what's going to happen. It's the most exciting part of the book, basically. So look for that kind of excitement in your book. Not everything's going to be life or death, right? If it was a sports book, it might be this is the final playoff game, right? If it was some sort of business book, maybe there's one final big deal that falls through, or you know, it kind of depends on what your book's about, how dramatic that climax is going to be. Okay, number 2, describe the falling action of the book. What are some of the loose ends that are getting tied up or taken care of? Are there some subplots or situation involving other characters that are getting resolved as well? Now, this again depends on the book. Some books will have a lot of falling action. They've got a lot of subplots, a lot of things they need to wrap up, but others may have only a little. So it depends a little bit too on how close the climax is to the end. So again, going back to the Hunger Games, they get rescued. They're in terrible shape. They get taken in, separated, cleaned up, given medicine, fed. But then there's this whole kind of interviews they have to go through where they have to keep on selling the idea that they're so madly in love they couldn't stand to live without each other. And then they have the train ride back to their community where Katniss ends up telling Peeta, oh, that was kind of mostly an act because I was trying to keep us both alive. And those are kind of some of the falling action where things are getting wrapped up a little bit. Number 3, describe the very end of the book. Describe the final state of the major characters. How have things changed from the beginning? And it may be internal or external changes or both. So at the very end of the book, they've arrived back home and they're about to step out and greet everybody, but everything's being filmed. And so by this point, Peeta has realized that Katniss hasn't really fallen in love with him. Katniss has realized that he actually has fallen in love with her. His feelings are hurt. Neither of them want to talk to each other, but they have to pretend to be in love, and they're kind of stepping out, and you don't really know what's about to happen next. Talking about how they've changed. Now, I tend to be a little bit long-winded, so this is probably a little bit more than you would write, but I wanted to kind of get the idea across, right? Because you need to cover each of the main characters. The way I wrote it, I figured Katniss is a main character, obviously. Peeta is also a main character to my mind. And then I kind of included Haymitch. And I don't know if I necessarily had to, but because he does have a lot of influence on what happens in the book, it seemed reasonable to me to include him. But I would not have penalized somebody if they had decided, no, I'm only going to cover Katniss and Peeta. However, if you had only covered Katniss, I feel like you would have kind of missed out because Peeta's a pretty important part. I don't think you can tell the entire story without mentioning his part in the story. Okay, so here's how it goes. The main characters have changed dramatically from the beginning of the novel to the end. At the beginning, Katniss is straightforward and relatively honest. She says what she means. She is a bit distant from most people, other than loving and protecting her family and Gale. By the end of the book, she has begun to make connections to other people, as she realizes how many others are in a similar situation to her, in which they are good people who are desperate to survive. She has also learned how to lie and deceive people in a way that she wasn't really capable of at the beginning of the movie. And I really should give an example there. I kind of messed up by not doing that. She has also become willing to kill others to survive if that is what it takes. Peeta, who is portrayed as essentially honest and kind-hearted, the kind of kid willing to take a beating from his mother in order to feed bread to Katniss when she was starving. While he retains that core goodness, he also learns how to lie and deceive to a degree, although he still remains far more trusting than Katniss is. While Katniss is pretending to love him in order to survive, he has honestly fallen in love with her. Even Haymitch has changed. At the beginning of the book, he's a drunken man who doesn't really seem to care about anyone and doesn't really care about the Peeta and Katniss because he doesn't think they're going to survive. But he gradually comes to care about these two kids and he wants them to survive, so he begins to try to train them as well as he can. A large part of this includes trying to train Katniss how to be more manipulative and less straightforward, including warning her at the end of the games that her life was still at risk, unless she could convince the Capitol that her threat to commit unaliveness with the berries was because she was genuinely in love, not because she was defiant against them. Now, again, I don't need to talk about every character, just the major ones. I really debated about Haymitch, but because he's pretty key to how the story ends, I really thought it was important to mention. Looking back over the entire book, what is the overall theme or message of the book? Remember that you're not going to just name a topic like hope or love or survival. You have to state what is the big idea or message that the novel wants the reader to know about the topic. Try to describe at least 3 events, choices, thinking, or speeches that help you determine the overall theme and how they help to illustrate the theme in some way. So the word illustrate, I don't mean like draw me a picture. I mean like how do they represent the theme? Like how do somebody's actions or words um, make you understand the theme in a better way? So here is an example. Now, again, I'm continuing to use Hunger Games. My only concern here is because it's the first book in a trilogy, the theme of the book by itself might be a little bit different than the theme of the entire trilogy. The other thing is, of course, there are some differences between the book and the movie, and some of you may have only seen the movie and not seen the book. So it is a little bit tricky, but I still felt like this was the right one to keep on using, okay? I do think theme is really one of the harder things to write about, but I think the important thing to realize is there's no like right way. There's no one right answer about theme. Like when I wrote this, I kind of played around a little bit with how to discuss the theme. What I've got, I'm mostly happy with, but it's possible if I wrote it again in 2 weeks, I might change it slightly. So I don't want you to feel like you're scrambling around trying to make the right answer. I just need any kind of answer that's reasonable that you can support with evidence, okay? So I decided that the theme of the Hunger Games is that individuals need to choose what principles they're willing to compromise in order to survive. Peeta, for example, chose to lie and to hide, but he tries very hard not to kill anyone in this book. Katniss, however, is very willing to kill in order to, so she's willing to kill several of her competitors in order to survive. Hang on a second. There we go. Both of them find themselves forced to lie and deceive others in order to survive. In fact, the need for almost everyone in the community to lie and try to deceive the authorities is an enormous element of the book. Even people who seem like they are part of the system, such as the broadcaster Caesar Flickerman, seem to try to protect Katniss by giving them lies to say when they go dry on camera. Like he's kind of deceiving when he's doing that. The effort to survive also gradually erodes people's conscience and goodness as they are forced to choose between dying or doing something wrong in order to survive. Katniss pretends to be in love with Peeta in order to survive and manages to fool even Peeta into believing it. She changes from someone who hunts small animals for food into someone who hunts humans to survive. She becomes stronger, but less kind, which begins to seem like the purpose of the Hunger Games, to create people as ruthless and desperate as the government seems to be. All right. Moving on. Part 2, reflecting on the process. When we began the novel study, you chose some strategies that you thought would help you understand the book. While we worked through the book, we also made a deliberate focus on using certain reading strategies. Looking back over your reading and your notes, which strategies did you find were the most helpful in understanding this novel, and which strategies would you like to get better at using? Number 6, how did writing about the book in these assignments increase your understanding of the book's characters, plot, theme, or other aspects? Try to discuss at least 2 to 3 ways it helped. Hang on a second. Okay. So this one might be a little bit tricky because I'm not sure everybody really believes that writing about a book helps them understand it. But if you want to think of it this way, like if I'm watching a movie and I have a conversation with, say, my husband or a friend about the movie, talking about it and trying to explain my ideas helps me understand it a lot more, as does hearing their ideas, right? So as you're trying to give me details and support your ideas, it is, I believe, going to help you understand things a little more clearly. Okay, so that's my belief. Try to discuss 2 or 3 ways that it helped. Okay. Number 7, I want you to do an internet search on the author of the book that you read. Try to locate things like websites, YouTube, Twitter, X, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. List at least 3 examples of media sites that they use. Discuss what types of information they share on these sites and what effects this might have on how they sell products, such as books, or services such as presentations, in order to make money. Now, I didn't use the Hunger Games for this one because, as you saw, Suzanne Collins only had one site. If that happens to you, give me a quick message so I can kind of work out a way to solve that problem. I don't know if that's going to be common for people or not. So I'll kind of show you. I grabbed a guy named Douglas Coupland. He had a really nice website. It had a lot of different categories of his different types of work. Things like art and events, column and essays, new and upcoming books, press columns, academics. That's like academic articles that he wrote like for university. The Rabbit Lane project is kind of a little art project he did, and then all about himself and contact. So I really liked his website. It's pretty detailed. He's older. He's got a lot of work out there. Basically, like it won't work here, but if you click on it, then you'll see a site open up and a whole bunch of information will pop out. However, he was not huge on other sites. Like he was on X, but you can see he's got information from 2017, 2021. He doesn't have anything that's very current, okay? There is an Instagram site, but the site was trying to block me. I was trying to like even make an account so I could just take a look, but I really couldn't see what was on it. Because he is someone who's an artist, I did wonder if he might have a lot more on the Instagram site, but I'm not positive. He also does have a YouTube channel, but again, it looks like a lot of what he posted is from quite a while ago, like 14 years, not a lot of current stuff. Not sure why. He also had a Facebook site. His most recent book that he wrote is advertised. This site that was also not very active. It all kind of ends around 2017, 2018. I did wonder if he currently just kind of feels like he's retired and therefore maybe he's not really adding stuff about it. There isn't any sort of announcement on his website, but he could still have, made a personal decision to do that. He's about maybe 10-ish years older than me, so he might well have retired. So, after looking at their media presence, what influence or effects do you feel that this writer has had on how Indigenous identity and heritage is perceived by Indigenous and non-Indigenous people? Okay. I know that this is a little bit of a tricky question to discuss, so I will appreciate your best efforts. Influence is a really hard thing to measure or discuss. You could look for things like how many followers do they have? What awards have they won? Have they, created any movements? What kind of events do they attend? What causes or organizations do they support? What kind of discussions or comments do they get into with people on their sites? Have they created anything new or any type of change? Do they teach students or show leadership or activism in some ways? Like Stephen King, for example, is very active about trying to encourage people to read banned books. That's kind of a big thing for him, and he talks about that, for example. He also does a lot of teaching people how to write. Now, I deliberately chose Douglas because he was non-Indigenous, because I didn't want to accidentally take an Indigenous author that someone else wanted to use. So having said that, the Indigenous issue is not really going to come up with him. Um, and I was trying to decide how he might influence people. And I found I had to look a little bit at articles about him rather than by him, especially because he wasn't currently very active on social media. So here is a little link to one of the articles I read about him. And this is some of what I understood from what I read, which was Douglas has sometimes been referred to as the voice of a generation. He is well known for the creation of the term Generation X. Before he created this new label, everyone was just known as the boomers. He felt that that didn't adequately describe how different people born between the mid-60s to 1980 were from the people before them. His labeling of a generation has become an ongoing phenomena, with each generation developing its own title. He has also written at least 14 novels and created a lot of art in public spaces. He has won several awards, such as Officer of the Order of Canada and member of the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts. So I kind of looked generally at it. And it's totally possible that some people may not have had a whole lot of effect on people, especially if they are a newer writer. Someone who's been writing for 40 or 50 years is probably going to have had a lot more effect than somebody who's just been like, just put out their first novel, because I don't know who you're going to be reading, right? So that's kind of, I'm making it as broad as possible. Maybe there will be a lot to say. Somebody like Justice Sinclair Murray was very influential, Thomas King, Richard Wagamese, but they're also older. So I don't know what you've chosen to read. So that will kind of depend on what kind of influence they've had, okay? Tomorrow, we're going to begin talking about the research project, which I will kind of go into more there. I know it's kind of two bigger projects kind of back to back, so I would probably finish up your novel before you begin the research project. You do want to give yourself enough time to do a good job on the research project, but we'll also kind of take it in stages, okay, if that makes sense. So if you have any questions, shoot me a phone call and I'd be happy to talk to you, or give me a little email and I can respond back and give you whatever help you might need. Hope you have a good night, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.